Let's start tonight in Nigeria, where it is widely feared now that the country could be facing a potential blackout on its hands, given the strike that we're now seeing by employees in the oil sector as a whole. The industrial action has led to the disruption of gas supply to 5 power generation plants right across the country. Electricity Minister Professor Chinedu Nebo, in a statement issued yesterday, urged workers in the petroleum resources sector to call off this strike, stressing that the effect of the strike is severe, especially on the power sector. The strike started on Tuesday this week. It was sparked off by a disagreement between the workers' union and management over the pension management system. Other demands that are, of course, an issue here include a failure to carry out a turnaround maintenance on 4 refineries as agreed between government and the 2 unions, and the restoration of crude supply to refineries as well. Elsewhere, Zimbabwe is set to register its first grain surplus in more than a decade this year. A survey conducted by the Zimbabwe Vulnerability Assessment Committee says the country last recorded a surplus in the year 2000, and donor agencies at the time put it down to investment in conducive agricultural output policies by the country's government. Farai Makatuya has more.
It's become the norm that every year millions of Zimbabweans receive emergency food aid. The country has been ravaged by perennial shortages due to a combination of disruptive farm invasions, erratic weather, and poor farming practices. This year, only an estimated 430,000 people will receive aid during the lean period between January and March. The World Food Programme estimates the task of feeding them will require about $24.2 million. It's a massive reversal in fortunes.
Last year, when I arrived in the country, we were talking about 2.2 million people needing food assistance. So this has been a dramatic improvement.
Zimbabwe's government has prioritized food security over the next 5 years, but has been working on redressing the food shortages for some time now. It seems to be reaping the dividends.
Food and nutrition security policy that has been adopted by the government, I think it was in November 2012. And this is, in fact, a policy that promotes a multi-sectoral approach to address food and nutrition insecurity, especially the establishment and the strengthening of national structures that are responsible for food and nutrition security.
But the right legal and policy frameworks now in place need to be complemented by human and financial resources, which is where Zimbabwe still faces some challenges. Many of the resettled farmers don't have title to their farms and have not been able to access loans to expand their operations, while others have failed to resist the quick riches from cash crops like tobacco at the expense of food crops. Government plans to recapitalize the National Grain Reserve so it can pay competitive prices again and stimulate more maize and grain farming. Farai Makutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
In the meantime, Zimbabwe's President Robert Gabriel Mugabe has stressed the need for the transformation of the non-aligned movement into an economic powerhouse where member states can trade their beneficiated goods right amongst themselves. He is, of course, the chairman of the South African Development Group, and he's leading the calls now for minerals extracted in Africa to be exported as finished products and not as simply raw materials.
Zimbabwe, which recently took over chairmanship of SADC, has been advocating for the reduction of poverty on the continent through the implementation of strategies that identify international best practices and policies in research and development in mineral processing and beneficiation to enable African countries realize full benefits from natural resources.
The activities and vitality of the non-aligned movement also seem to have subsided politically. And this is what is worrying us at the moment. And if we now can bring ourselves together through trade, because of beneficiation, adding value to our products is not a mere process of doing it internally in our domestic environments. It's adding value as you trade. Then we become linked as NAM.
At a recent workshop in Harare, members of the Center for Science and Technology of the Non-Aligned and other developing countries deliberated on various aspects of mineral processing and beneficiation.
Science and technology is thus important. It is indeed an important instrument to not only achieve this beneficiation, but also the broader socio-economic development in all facets of our lives. In other words, science and technology should be the drivers of the economy.
As raw materials earn less than finished goods, the call is now for countries to concentrate efforts to ensure that each mineral is examined and beneficiated from extraction right through to trade. Robert Soy, CCTV.
Let's talk about the South African rand now. It held near 7-month lows against the US dollar on Friday as markets responded to the end of Governor Jill Marcus's 5-year term at the bank. She took markets entirely by surprise 24 hours ago when she announced, after the bank had left interest rates unchanged at 5.75% as expected, that she would be stepping down at the end of her term in November and not seeking a renewal. Now, the rand was testing 7-month lows against the dollar today, traded at about 11 rand and 8 cents against the dollar. That compares to about 11 rand 7 cents to the dollar on Thursday. Analysts say this decline is essentially a knee-jerk reaction to the announcement. It essentially underscores the esteem in which Marcus is held by the markets. Dealers said the uncertainty over who will succeed her is also making investors quite nervous. Let's get some more now from Sumitra Naidu, who joins us live from Johannesburg with more data on this particular story. Sumitra, she had the respect of the markets. People respected her decisions. What were the governor's reasons for leaving after just one term in office?
Well, Rama, there's plenty of speculation floating around as to why the governor is leaving. And that's because the governor didn't really give any reason for her decision. We do know, though, she is at retirement age. She is 65. But she made that announcement after this week's Monetary Policy Committee meeting. And as per usual, she delivers the committee's decision on rates with a statement detailing the Reserve Bank's outlook on inflation, how the economy is faring, currency movement, and so on. So it came as quite a big surprise to everyone when she said she was stepping down. She said that she was comfortable to be leaving and that she is confident in the great team that she has at the bank. The governor also said that she had made a decision earlier this year to leave when her contract ended in November, and that she had informed President Jacob Zuma. So it's there is lots of speculation running around as to why exactly she left and why a successor hasn't been announced as yet.
Indeed, a lot of speculation, but no hard data yet. Let's talk about her likely successors. Are we likely to see her replacement coming in from within the ranks of the South African Reserve Bank, or is an outsider just as likely to become the next governor?
Well, there's lots of speculation about that as well. And I think we saw it on the market. The market didn't react too well to the announcement, firstly, because Jill Marcus was, as you say, liked by investors, and she also had proved to be a strong, credible governor. But secondly, because there was no successor announced, and of course that created a whole lot of uncertainty. So far, the most widely speculated candidates for the job is Lesetja Kganyago and Daniel Manella. Both are deputy governors at the Reserve Bank. Manella, though, served with Marcus since 2009, while Kganyago joined the central bank in 2011. However, Kganyago, he spent 7 years with the National Treasury and worked closely with the finance minister. And most analysts say that this is a good element to have, but both men have strong credentials. It's wait and see at this point.
Indeed. Finally, Sumitra, given how weak growth is in South Africa, can Jill Marcus's successor continue with the Reserve Bank's inflation targeting policy in its current form without tipping South Africa into a recession?
It has been an extremely fine balancing act for the Reserve Bank. But if we're looking at these two gentlemen as likely successors, both sit on the Reserve Bank's 7-member Monetary Policy Committee. They've both spent a lot of time with Jill Marcus, and they have a solid understanding of the financial sector, how the Reserve Bank itself works, its altered mandate, and its impact on the economy. However, as you say, the South African economy is facing some serious headwinds, and it will be key to have a successor that can steer the ship. Another point why markets were unsettled yesterday about Jill Marcus leaving was because she stuck to her guns. She was firm and frank about inflation and rates. She had been warning for months now about wage inflation, the impact of strike action. She was also very outspoken about excessive salaries for CEOs. So it is very important that her replacement continues with that kind of stance, because South African economy is in some serious trouble at the moment, and inflation seems to be the biggest problem here.
Yes,
Rama?
indeed. Her successor does have some fairly big shoes to fill. We'll leave it there for now. That's Sumitra Naidu live in Johannesburg, South Africa. Let's cross the Atlantic over to Wall Street, where Chinese e-commerce powerhouse Alibaba just made its debut at the New York Stock Exchange. Its shares are trading under the symbol BABA, or BABA, if you will. Alibaba has priced its initial public offering at about $68 a share, the top end of its expected range. However, it bounced all the way through to $90 a share once trading started. The company said it was offering 320 million shares for a total of $21.8 billion. Underwriters have a 30-day option to buy up 15% more shares, and that could mean the offering could be as much as $25 billion in total, making Alibaba the world's biggest ever IPO. Now, analysts say the main reason investors are pretty excited about Alibaba is that the 15-year-old company offers an investment vehicle that essentially allows you to tap into China's growing middle-class consumer story. Let's make a quick run through the equity markets here for you. Starting with the JSE, resources, of course, dragging it much lower. Kumba Iron Ore, for example, down by 1.15%. The gold mining index as a whole also down by about 15 basis points. In East Africa, however, completely different story. The NSE is at a 6-year high. The last time it was close to these levels, it was 2008. 5311.82 was a number back then. Now we're seeing 5307.52. Let's see exactly what happens when trading does resume on Monday. When we come back, we'll explore Lake Rose in Senegal. It's a source of significant salt deposits. And we'll have a chat with Virginia Morule. She's running a multi-million-dollar business in a field usually dominated by men. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening. Welcome back to the program. 15 minutes into the hour, you're still watching Global Business Africa. Now, the Ebola crisis in West Africa, it's grabbed the attention of many international organizations. Military and aerospace companies also trying to contain the spread of this deadly virus. Angelo Coppola was at the Africa Aerospace and Defense Exhibition in Pretoria, South Africa. He found this report on their efforts so far.
Other operators are already working with international groupings on an ad hoc basis, providing much needed logistical support.
At the moment, we got the Bell 412 in Liberia, together with the World Health Organization. We're flying nurses or doctors from city to city to see if there's any Ebola sick patients there. We also have been contacted by the American government if they can use our helicopter as well. If they're longer there than 6 months, we will bring another helicopter up there.
Many defense equipment manufacturers have designed and developed lightweight mobile medical treatment facilities that can be quickly deployed in remote Ebola crisis areas for international organizations.
One would be, for instance, the UN or one of the African Union or the SADC or something like that. that could either use it to airdrop it in regions where you don't necessarily want to bring a lot of people in if we talk in the Ebola crisis.
On the other hand, there are other organizations or manufacturers that are waiting for the green light because they haven't been commissioned yet.
There's never enough done when it comes to a humanitarian crisis, what we currently experience in West Africa. I'm not aware at least of any aircraft being used from us in this role, but there will be for sure.
While the humanitarian crisis rages, manufacturers have the equipment and the expertise to make a difference. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV.
Let's talk about Lake Rose. It's a unique water body over in Senegal, and it's unique for one particular feature. It changes color more often than not. It's a tourist attraction, but it also has significant salt deposits in it. On What's Hot Tonight, Jane Keogh reports on how the extraction of that commodity has become a source of employment for many Senegalese and revenue for the government as well.
Lake Retba, or Lake Rose, lies north of the Cape Verde Peninsula of Senegal, some 30 kilometers northeast of the capital, Dakar. The pink coloration on the water is caused by algae, which produces a red pigment to assist in absorbing light. The color is particularly visible during the dry season and is less visible during the rainy season. Lake Retba is also known for its high salt content, up to 40% in some areas, thanks to subsequent evaporation. In 1975, Senegal approved salt extraction from the lake, creating thousands of jobs in the process. Every year, the lake can produce up to 24,000 tons of salt and offer more than 1,000 job opportunities for locals who work 6 to 7 hours a day.
Today, you dig a hole at the bottom of the lake. Tomorrow, you'll find a hole replenished by salt. This is why we have the infinite salt to excavate. When the rainy season comes, there are not so abundant salt because the rainwater and the lake water are integrated. If it is not the rainy season, every worker can replenish 2 boats per day.
Workers face a lot of challenges during the rainy season. Value of the salt reduces because of its soggy state, and workers have to work even harder to extract the resource. Some of them make as little as $35 a day during the period, compared to the dry season when they earn $100 to $300 for the work. The extracted salt is exported across West Africa in countries like Mali, Guinea, Sierra Leone and other neighboring countries. Senegalese fishermen also use the salt to preserve fish. Jane Keogh, CCTV.
Let's talk about Huawei. It's launched its next-generation networking tools. It's dubbed it the Huawei Agile Network. Now, the launch, of course, took place in South Africa. The company claims that this particular product is an industry first. It's centered on services, users, and the experiences they all have. The solution has been deployed in about 200 or so networks for commercial use in industries that range from public sector utilities to finance, medical services, large private enterprises, transport, education and broadcast media. The Director of Product Marketing, Ajay Gupta, says that South Africa is ready for a future-proof network solution. And this Agile network is expected to be rolled out on local shores between the end of the year and the start of 2015.
Agile networking, in a simple terms, is sort of, if you compare it with the traditional networking and the agile networking, it's like a feature phone versus a smartphone. Agile networking is a new way of doing the networking. It's a lot more flexible, it's a lot more adaptable, it's a lot more quicker. The service provisioning times goes from 18 to 24 months into 3 to 6 months. It really helps you to future-proof your investment. As the new protocols, new applications are gonna emerge, you're not gonna rip off your existing hardware. You want your hardware infrastructure to be ready for the future, for things like what we say software-defined networking. It can actually help you troubleshoot the faults on the link, on the chip, on the module from an end-to-end basis. It can proactively monitor. At the end of the day, what the CIOs and CXOs are looking for really a TCO and a return on investment, and that's what we really exactly want to do and bringing that value to our South African customers.
Quick run through the commodity prices today. As we mentioned earlier, when we looked at the equity numbers, resource stocks essentially being dragged much lower. And that story remains pretty much the same as it has been for the last couple of months, really. Crude oil prices heading much lower. Gold, pretty much the same story. It's at its lowest price, really, since January. Silver, on the other hand, also much lower, down to about a 4-year low. And we'll come back to the details and the effects of that on public finances in Nigeria, especially with regard to oil, a little later. When you come back, we'll have a chat with 51-year-old Virginia Marule. She's running a multi-million-dollar business in a sector normally dominated by men. Bucking trends here when you come back. All that and more on the way. Welcome back to the program. You're still watching Global Business Africa. Now, quick run through the news making headlines right across the dailies in Africa. Let's start in North Africa, Egypt to be specific. Al Ahram Daily is quoting a government official over Egypt's involvement in the fight against ISIL. The official says, quote, no final decision has been taken yet, but it will be a mixture of several things. Essentially intelligence, but also what you could generally qualify as military logistics, end of quote. Now, the US has been on a campaign to weed out this particular group, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. It's been causing havoc in Syria and northern Iraq as well. It's called on more countries to support its endeavors. Over in Kenya, Business Daily reports that the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to attend another Africa Rising Forum on Development in the United States. A meeting is an important follow-up to the US-Africa Leaders Summit hosted by President Barack Obama in August. That's so American businesses commit to billions of dollars in new investments right across Africa. And finally, in West Africa, Nigeria's Vanguard says ahead of his formal re-election declaration, the Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan has been adopted as the sole presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party by the National Working Committee and the Board of Trustees of that particular body. The party's Governors Forum had on Wednesday endorsed him for second term. That essentially means he will stand as the only aspirant at PDP's December 6th presidential primaries unless a dark horse left field contender emerges between now and then. Now, doing business in Africa, not for the faint of heart, definitely not easy, but it is worth it. Being a businesswoman in Africa, however, usually tends to be a lot harder. But the thing is, more and more African women are taking up the challenge, and a lot of them are now going into male-dominated industries, and they're finding that success comes to those who push the boundaries and break the rules. On Grassroots tonight, Sumitra Naidu tells us about one such female entrepreneur in South Africa.
51-year-old Virginia Marule started out as a farmer in the outlying areas of Johannesburg, but it was during this time that she realized there was a need for heavy-duty agricultural machinery.
I realized that when I was looking for equipment or the parts, I couldn't find them easily. And then I started to go to attend the Nampo show where I met some farmers and we started to ask them questions, but they had similar problem like mine. And then I realized that there is a market for somebody to import farming or agriculture equipment.
She started selling imported machinery out of a catalogue, but this was far too expensive for local farmers. In 2004, she founded the Agro Tractor House, which builds agricultural trailers and fertilizer machines from scratch.
I targeted the small-scale farmers because the small-scale farmers, they needed equipment that are more manually, unlike you sell them computerized equipment like tractors that are big. So it was small-scale farmer who will need tractors that can be fixed by an ordinary mechanic.
Marule now runs a $1 million company. She employs 10 people. Her biggest market is South African commercial farmers. She also exports to several African countries, including Mozambique, Swaziland and Namibia. Agro Tractor also has a partnership with a Kenyan company.
In Kenya, we are also producing the same trailer, but we realized the costs were very high. Now we're producing them in South Africa, then we send them as full product. Majority of people that we sell this type of trailer to are the farmers that are into maize and those that are doing wheat. The one that we have here, it is a rear tipping trailer. It can trip only to the back.
The company imports most of its parts to build the machinery, which is often expensive because of the weak currency. Marule's other challenge in doing business in Africa and other parts of the world is the language barrier, as it sometimes delays the time it takes to do deals.
You want to talk to somebody and explain the thing he doesn't understand, so you need to get an interpreter. By the time you realize what you wanted to sell to the client, it's going to take you more time.
While Agro Tractor House is black economically empowered, it sometimes poses a challenge to the way business is run.
The problem with the government's laws is that on the employment equity, you find that you wanted to make more people that are in the employment, they have to be blacks. And now some of them, they don't have the skills that are required.
Virginia has just completed a deal with Denmark to manufacture and distribute tractors to Scandinavian countries. Sumitra Nadu, CCTV, Johannesburg.
Right, from girl power, let's make a quick run through currencies right across Africa. Our focus today, however, is in Nigeria. The central bank held the base lending rate at 12%, pretty much where it's been for the last 3 years or so. However, key risks moving forward, lingering inflation pressures. That's still a big concern. The depreciation of the Naira is certainly another, as are falling oil output and prices as well. But that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa, at least for this particular week. We'll be back on Monday. Send your feedback to Global Business Africa at cctv.com. Wherever you're online, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, we're there. The news continues 24/7. I will be making way for Mahia Mutu and the sports team. We'll see you on Monday. Thank you for